So, hi everybody, good evening. Welcome to our New Voices talk series on Emilie du Châtelet. We welcome tonight Susana Seguin. She is a senior lecturer in the Department of French Literature at the University of Montpellier and a researcher at the NS of Lyon. She is interested in the 18th century French literature, clandestine literature, philosophy, and philosophy of science, and on Fontenelle, Voltaire, and du Châtelet. And she will give us today a talk on the Examens de la Bible in the context of the clandestine philosophical manuscripts and present the digital edition project of this work, which is currently under preparation. And so I will give the floor now to Susana Seguin for her talk. Many thanks for accepting our invitation.
Okay, thank you very much for your invitation to this seminar. And I will first to ask you to excuse my English. I will do my best for you, but if you accept it, I will try to answer to your questions in English, but if it is necessary, I will speak in French because I think I will be more clear. I will speak better than in English, okay? Today, I would like to introduce you to another aspect of Emilie du Châtelet's work, which is her participation on an underground movement, the philosophical clandestine literature. You know that Emilie du Châtelet not only translated Newton and Mandeville, she was a scientist herself. He debated with philosophers, and scientists of her time and defied dominant masculine thoughts. But she goes further. She is also the author of one of the most virulent texts against religion. It is the Examens de la Bible, the examinations of the Bible. And this is the text I would like to talk about this afternoon. I would like to articulate my presentation in 3 steps. First, a brief presentation of the main characteristic of clandestine philosophical literature, because I apologize to those who have heard me talk about this before. So Ruth, sorry for you. But this point is very important because I think some of you maybe not be familiar with this kind of literature. And secondly, I will make a brief review on the elements of in Emilie du Châtelet Examen, and to show you the characteristic of a women philosopher in the context of clandestine literature. And finally, we will talk about this new project, Philosophie clandestine, and the new digital edition of du Châtelet manuscripts, which we are working on. So the third question for you is, what is this clandestine literature? What do we mean by philosophical clandestine literature? It's a corpus comprised of manuscripts identified for the first time by Gustave Lanson in 1912 and by Ira Wade in 1938. And this corpus have continued to grow in number, and now we have some 360 titles in more or less 3,000 copies preserved in European libraries, and especially in French libraries, but not only, and of which the covert circulation has been well documented. The consistency of this corpus is not based on any observable material criteria, such as that of circulating clandestinely, Otherwise, we would need to include on this volume a large number of texts, from pornographic works to poésie fugitive, and also some religious texts like Johnsonist writings, because these different literatures share same methods and diffusion and reception with our text. Most, but not all, of these writings are handwritten, distributed without the name of the author or with Sibylline attributions, as well until recently the case for the text of Madame du Châtelet, identified in the last 10 years by Bertrand Schwarzbach. These texts were disseminated, but not necessarily to a printing stage. Right? This was not necessarily printed text. Some texts still manuscript, like this one of Madame du Châtelet, since 10 years. The intellectual and material history of the book and of reading show us that the different forms that clandestine philosophy took, so manuscripts, some editions outside France, clandestine editions inside France, constitute a configuration unique to intellectual life of the 17th and 18th centuries, in that these practices were exploited by work that, for different reasons, evaded the strict demands of the book market and the practice of royal and religious censorship, to which the large majority of publications were submitted. In fact, clandestine literature, and even more the choice of an handwritten format, not only was a response to the need for protection that authors and readers felt, thus creating a mode of dissemination to certain insider circles, but also constitute an economical and intellectual choice. It was cheaper to make a manuscript than some public text. The handwritten format, which predominated in the corpus of clandestine philosophy, seems to have reflected a unique trait of this literature. Besides being a favorite means for the dissemination of innately polemical thoughts, handwritten material were malleable. They were reusable by other readers, who subsequently became authors and copiers. All of this was associated with the elaboration and diffusion of a way of thinking that was as much as individual as it was collective, the simultaneous expression of leading figures and of a social phenomenon, the translation of the crise des consciences, crisis of conscience, to borrow the title of Paul Hazard's book, where the name of individuals counted maybe less than the network of meaning that structured the text, and where the beauty of their form often mattered much less than the strength of the arguments. I hope it's clear. Okay. What characterizes this text, beside their covert diffusion and manuscript format, is the fact that they are philosophical, in the broader sense attributed to this term by the Enlightenment, in France especially. That sense was defined precisely by the article philosophe in the Encyclopédie, which was indeed extracted from a clandestine manuscript written by Du Marsay, Le Philosophe. They deal in a critical subversive or impious spirit with essentially metaphysical or religious questions while combating prejudice through rational reflection, philosophical, historical, and scientific reason. Thus, the texts are, for the most part, heterodox writings, to the extent that in the majority of cases, the idea that they condemn concern the tenet of religious faith, God himself, his existence, his essence, and his relationship with the world and with human beings. The human soul, its spirituality and immortality, revelation, authenticity or coherence of the biblical scriptures, validity of the prophecies and miracles, competence of exegesis, and this is the point in Madame du Châtelet manuscripts, and Christianity, the historical religion in general, their origin, their relationship with the political world, the crimes committed in their name, and Christianity, and especially Catholicism, because it's a French movement, through its history, dogma, mysteries, and morality. However, this constant aspect of clandestine philosophy may express itself according to a number of different philosophical orientations, from naturalism to materialism, from atheism to pantheism or deism, and reflect the influence of the philosophical systems of 17th century, especially Descartes, Hobbes, Spinoza, and of course, the libertins érudits. It is because of its association with this unorthodox content, as well as its format malleable, which was compatible with dynamic thoughts, in perpetual re-elaboration, and easily adaptable to the condition of clandestine circulation, that this corpus constituted a particularly strong weapon in the underground philosophy of the end of 17th century art and for at least the first half of the 18th century. It is likewise the reason because Lamson was able to compile the fair list of 20 titles of clandestine philosophical manuscripts, because he recognized them as a major source of the most polemical ideas of the Enlightenment authors. The Examens de la Bible by Madame du Châtelet fall within the definition of the clandestine corpus. I don't enter into a detailed analysis here because it's a big book. You have all the Bible inside. And Bertram Schwarzbach has done a very good introduction to his edition of the text, but we can see that the work produced by Madame du Châtelet respects all the criteria, both in terms of its material character, because it's an anonymous manuscript, at least until recently, and its methodological and philosophical approach. Thus, the treatise presents a critical commentary of each book of the Bible, subverting the apologetic method of the period, in particular, that of the model of this kind of text, Augustin Calmet, who at the beginning of the century had authored a Commentaire de la Bible, which Voltaire would later adopt as one of his preferred targets against religion. And Madame du Châtelet was a friend to Augustin Calmet. He wrote the history of du Châtelet's family. And finally, by the systematic method chosen by Emilie, she puts the Christian religion on trial, on Catholicism in particular, by attacking the very foundation of Christian theology, the scriptures, employing all the angles of attack characteristic of clandestine philosophical literature. Denunciation of revelation, the absurdity of the prophecies and miracles, the immorality of Old Testament, we will talk about some examples, contradictions in the gospel text, for example, in the genealogy of Jesus, and different other points. The manuscript subjects the Bible, book after book, to a rational reading whose arguments are derived from historical and scientific reasoning, the critical use of apologetical sources, as well as an internal analysis of the work for the purposes of demonstrating its human inspiration, its imperfections, and therefore the impossibility of its conveying a particular revealed message and imposing any kind of universal morality. Through its choice of methodology, so taking the founding text of the Christian religion and the strength of the criticism offered, the Examens of Madame du Châtelet constitute one of the most systematic and effective clandestine philosophical manuscripts of the first half of the 18th century and appear to complete the intellectual output of this, exceptional woman by bringing a new dimension to her already rich and influential work. This will also help to explain the cloak of anonymity under which this manuscript has reached us. In only 3 copies now, maybe if you find some manuscripts similar to this one, you send me an email, please. We have only 3 copies now. This explains as well the profound legend that has developed over time concerning the author of this manuscript and her philosophical intentions. This is essentially what can be read in a correspondence between Condorcet and Turgot in 1772, which did not attribute this text to Emilie du Châtelet, but to the collaboration to Emilie, Voltaire, and maybe Saint-Lambert, Saint-Lambert, du Châtelet, last lover. So I will not return here to this question. The critical edition by Bertram Schwarzbach does so very methodically in a very long introduction of the book. But the point is, the attribution of the Examen de la Bible to Emilie du Châtelet can no longer be challenged. And we are sure now that the Examen is certainly the work of Emilie du Châtelet alone. But more important, maybe for us, in the context of Paderborn work, one of the elements that has confirmed the identity of the author is the feminine, maybe not feminist, but feminine character of the critic. So this is the second point I will talk with you. Some textual clues in French, very weak, seem to indicate a woman author. Only one of 3 copies, we note the presence of 5 adjectives or feminine forms of the past participle in French. That's not possible in a traduction, but in French we can find just 5 in 100 pages, but which seem to indicate a female writer. But these elements seems to me very small in the context of this very large manuscript to constitute a definitive proof. None of the 3 known copies of the Examens de la Bible was written in the hand of Emilie, for example. These cases may also be the consequence of a simple transcription mistake, especially if we take into account the very relative rigor of the copyist in this time. But the interest that the author of the manuscripts lends to women in the Bible appears to constitute more substantial evidence. Madame du Châtelet, because she is the author of the manuscript, we know that, is particularly interested in the status that the Bible gives to women often subject to male interests. She criticizes, for example, Abraham, who twice wanted to prostitute his wife Sarah, or who abandoned his concubine Hagar in the desert because of her son, because of the jealousy of Sarah. She admires Sephora, Moses' wife, who had the courage to circumcise her own son to save him from the angel who wanted to kill him. And she admires the strength of Abigail, who protected her first husband, Nabal, who had refused to help King David, the very man she was to marry after Nabal's death. But first, she protects her husband. The author of the manuscripts also demonstrates a firm knowledge of feminine and family life. She attached importance, for example, to Joseph's place in the education of the young Jesus, and to the delicacy that some women can show in their relationship with their husbands. She's also interested in the intimate life of women as well as in their sexuality. She offers explanation on the nature of menstrual blood and discusses conventional beliefs regarding the question of women's purity after childbirth, especially after the birth of a girl, because in this time we consider a woman was impure after childbirth, but especially with a girl. She uses this knowledge above all to mock religion, and especially the case of one Capuchin monk who claimed to be able to take on the pain caused by childbirth. This is the Examens de la Vie. I forgot to show you. From the moral point of view, she takes the defense of adulterous women, especially of those mentioned in chapter 8 of the book of John, unfairly accused by society and especially by men, whom she charges with repeated infidelities. On this point, she does not even spare the figure of Jesus. His proximity to several holy women, she said, during his travels seems to her very suspicious on the nature of his relationship with Mary Magdalene, does not seem to leave any room for doubt, even if Emilie is not shocked by this relationship. She also makes fun of the need for purity that weighs on young women and mentions that there are many ways to simulate lost virginity. So the author of the Examens is not, however, always supportive of female turpitude. She condemns Esther, who agreed to spend a night with Ahasuerus before deciding on her future, and condemns Ruth, not you, who slept with the wealthy Boaz in order to force him to marry her, because for Emilie, this is prostitution. But these criticisms are not made in the name of Christian morality. The case of Judith offers a very interesting counterexample because she is the model of stupid prudery, which does not prevent her from being also very bloodthirsty. Obviously, Madame du Châtelet's text draws its originality from its feminine character, but the Examens de la Bible are not the only clandestine philosophical manuscript, are the only manuscript written by a woman that we have been able to identify to this day. It's the only one. So it seems difficult to compare her approach to that of other female philosophers, in this corpus particular. A manuscript such as the anonymous Analyse de la religion chrétienne also comments systematically on passages on the Bible, but does not give the same room to the question of the status of women. Of course, the intention of the text is not, as in the case of Madame du Châtelet, to read each chapter of the Bible. And the author skips many passages that the method chosen by du Châtelet cannot ignore because she read everything. But the author of the Analyse is not interested in the matriarchs of the Old Testament, nor in the sexual life of women, except to point out the moral contradictions inherent in a supposedly revealed book. But if not, in other cases, no, women are not important for him. Another clandestine manuscript, contemporary with that of du Châtelet, whose author might have known the Examens de la Bible, according to Schwarzbach, can also serve here as a point of comparison. It is the preuve citée dans la religion chrétienne analysée sans y être rapportée. It's very complicated because it's a first manuscript, Analyse de la religion chrétienne, and someone read this manuscript and had the idea to write the proof that the first author has forgotten to put in his book. So it's the proof to add to the Analyse de la religion chrétienne. And this manuscript is conserved in the same collection that one of the copies of Emilie du Châtelet. And in the preuve, in this text, the anonymous author offers the same, a systematic reading of all the books of the Old Testament. So the same method than Emilie du Châtelet, but just for the Old Testament. And come across the same stories that are commented by Madame du Châtelet. However, again, he does not dwell on the cases evoked by the Examens, or if he does not in the same way. While the author takes an interest in the case of Sarah, it is only in order to denounce the absurdity of her motherhood at more than 90 years of age, but not her jealousy, for example, or her prostitution by Abraham, nothing. But the behavior of Abigail, Esther, of Ruth elicits no comments from him, except doubts about the author of the book that related their stories. Only one case, it's interesting, I think so, is the story of the rape of Dinah, reported in chapter 29 of Genesis, which might have interested Emilie, but she does not comment on it. The anonymous author of Épreuves, who built his criticism of the Bible on scholarly chronological calculation, on historical comparisons, is less astonished by the violence perpetrated on a 7-year-old girl, Dinah, by an adult, than by the improbability of the rest of the story. The many children that Jacob was able to father at the age of 85, and especially the age of Simon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, who killed all the men of the city of Salem to avenge the honor of their sister when they are only 11 and 12 years old. So a little girl raped, it's not a problem. This obvious thematic difference is confirmed when we compare Emilie du Châtelet Examens with other clandestine manuscripts of the same period. The choice of a systematic criticism of the Bible could, it is true, explain du Châtelet's attention to feminine stories despite some omissions, like Dinah rape. However, this seems to correspond more to a real interest in the status of women in Holy Scriptures and in religion, and in the consequences that these readings may have in the du Châtelet's time. The difference is also methodological. Emilie does not appeal to historical or chronological arguments, as the author of the Épreuves, whose criticism is much more scholarly. But basically, the intention of both authors remains the same: to denounce the absurdity of the Bible and his morality. And this denunciation is made in the name of reason and not in the name of gender specificity. The case of women are simply supplementary examples and not the main reason for Madame du Châtelet criticism. Emilie does not put biblical criticism at the service of a claim concerning the condition of women in the society of her time, nor does she make it the means of proclaiming intellectual gender equality. On the contrary, her criticism of religion takes into account points which concern the life, the moral condition, the education of women, and which could have escaped the men who, at the same time, were engaged in the same intellectual exercise. This fact seems to explain why the reception of the Examens was not very different from that of other anonymous works of the same corpus. And the 18th century readers, like Condorcet and Turgot, did not see in the text the work of a woman, but the legend of the collaboration of du Châtelet with Voltaire. Also, the first critical studies viewed in the text in a similar way, following the research conducted by Wade on the intellectual collaboration between Voltaire and Madame du Châtelet during their stay at Cîteaux. And even Schwarzbach need a long and patient analysis of the text in a critical edition to convince himself that the Examens de la Bible are the work of Emilie du Châtelet and of no one else but Emilie du Châtelet, because he thought the first time it was not Emilie du Châtelet's work. The examen, therefore, constitute a very particular case study in the world of the clandestine philosophical corpus. This is why we now want to propose a new digital edition within a scientific platform that I would like to present you very quickly. And to do this, I return for 2 minutes to the world of clandestine manuscripts. And I stop to share that, and I will share the platform. Okay, it's there, but no. Yes, it's there, but it's there. Okay. Working on clandestine literature implies not only working on a text in the abstract sense of the term, a piece of writing considered independently of the medium that carried it. It is necessary to work on an object, printed, but above all manuscript, whose material history is just as important as its content. Indeed, each copy is different, and each copy can provide vital information that make it possible to date the writing in question, to specify the context of production and reception, and in some cases, to identify its author. Most of our writings still anonymous or of doubtful attribution. The reception of these writings imply checking with which copy was consulted by different authors, readers. In fact, the instability of the manuscript medium can give rise to numerous families within the same title. You can have a manuscript, a title in 10 chapters, in 11 chapters, in 20 chapters, because each reader adds chapters to the first one. So you can have one title and 3 different families of text. The problem is that the copies are scattered and difficult to consult, because some copies are now in Russia, in America, in Japan. So you can go to any library to read different copies of your title. So we need to work with one virtual corpus, and that's possible because we have now digital humanities, and that's the point of our project. So one of the first objectives of the historical research on clandestine manuscript was to establish an inventory of the holdings of clandestine literature, and this project launched by Olivier Bloch in the 90s, and which found its first realization in the work of Miguel Benítez, La face cachée des Lumières, whose latest edition in Spanish offered the most complete list of our manuscripts with general information on location on certain codicological elements. And our journal, La Lettre Clandestine, the last issue is to Emilie du Châtelet. It's about Emilie du Châtelet. Thank you, Ruth. In our journal, we regularly publish new discoveries of manuscript or editions from our corpus, because we can find all the time new copies. We found and all the time new copies. But over time, working on the manuscript meant having about 15 different books on your desk, just for the identification of the manuscripts. And did not solve the problem of consulting the document themselves. So we decide to inscribe our work in the field of digital humanities and to think of a new research object, and we call it a virtual corpus, and this is Philosophie clandestine. Philosophie clandestine starts at Paderborn in our meeting on Emilie du Châtelet. Talking about Gianni Paganini, we said, we have not our books, we can't find the manuscript to ask some questions to this person, so we need to have it on internet. So we did it. Philosophie clandestine is conceived as a digital research tool, exploring the latest web functionalities. Is a platform giving free access to all publics to the complete list of clandestine philosophical manuscripts, regularly updated, as well as to set of practical informations on document through a unique tool. So you can access to the manuscripts, and you have 353 new titles, not copies, titles. So you have the list of manuscripts. You can search the entire database to find titles or variation of titles and found conservation places. So I search and I can find all the information about Emilie, Commentaires sur la Bible, because that's another title of the same book. For each title, you have the list of locations in the libraries all around the world, and some elements of precision for certain copies. For example, here, the third copy is a private collection, so we mention it, but we can give more information about that. But we provide geolocation of copies. I show you another case because this one is the most important collection of copies of manuscripts. Maybe you know that. So I'm working with two computers and use the bad one to search. Okay. Maybe you know the Traité des Trois Imposteurs. It's very, very famous clandestine manuscript. And we have more than 100 copies all around the world. So we use geolocation. Sorry, I lost my page. Okay. To provide an overview of the circulation of copies. Okay. And you can, when you see la plume, you can have exactly the location of library and informations to write to the library, to phone, to read the manuscript if you want. But this point must be taken with caution because the circulation of text can result of very diverse circumstances. And geolocation is also in progress because some libraries, especially those in the former Soviet countries, may have changed their name since they were identified. So we need to be sure the name of the libraries to give the geolocation. And when that is possible, I try to go back. Yes, we indicate the editions available for each document, and we refer to the edition when they are accessible in digital libraries. Maybe this one you can have in Gallica, digital edition of the text. Not the case of Emilie, because it was manuscript until Schwarzbach edition. We also offer consultation of manuscripts available online. And so in the case of Emilie, you can see the manuscripts, because this is available on Trois library. So you can see the manuscript. We provide, in some cases, transcription, and you can filter the list of manuscript with transcriptions, verified transcriptions by specialists. So you have the text. For the moment, it's just a PDF. So now we will work on online editions, and we provide also translation. So if you are inspired by the idea to translate the Examens de la Bible, you are welcome. But I know it's not here, but I show you. The imposteur. So you have the text in English. So you have no excuse to visit our website. And now we are sorry. Last thing before to show you the project, we provide some informations with authority files from European libraries. So I show you an example from Voltaire. So some informations when we know the author, just few informations, but especially nicknames, because that's important for us, the nicknames of the authors. So that's just a little list of the names used by Voltaire, just some names. And if you are working on a project like that, we have a Sparkle editor, so you can pick informations. That's very useful for libraries, especially for catalogs. But if you need informations from our manuscript, you can pick it for free. It's open source project. So as you can see, we offer a large amount of information that makes our database more than just a catalog of manuscripts. In only 5 years, we have considerably enriched our database, and it stands some informations can go unnoticed if you do not regularly visit our platform. So we are now working on improving the ergonomics of our website. New consultation interface will be soon available to ensure better visibility of the elements contents in the database. But we are now also launching a new phase of the project, which is a digital edition of the texts themselves. And this point is interesting for us because we are working on Examens. It's one of the first texts we want to publish. It's not the question of proposing a new scientific edition, because there are excellent published work that we have neither the strength, nor the time, nor the need to complete. But we have chosen to offer a digital edition like a research tool. Our idea is to allow the simultaneous consultation of a transcribed, modernized, standardized text of the most widely distributed version of the manuscript, enriched by TEI and using authoritative files with automatic enrichment. And this edition will be aligned to a basic manuscript and where available a printed version available on the 18th century. When this is the case, not for Madame du Châtelet, only manuscripts. The reader will then be able to choose which digital version of the manuscript or edition to read alongside the digital edition in order to better identify variants or changes in the main text. So I show you a very beta version of our project. So we will have different flux of text. You have here a transcription, a manuscript in one version, and this one should be another version of the manuscript. But we have a problem, and now everybody is on holiday, so I can ask for help to find the digital version of Finland library. So you can choose here, you will have a menu, and you can choose different versions of manuscripts and different editions to compare to one version, standard version, and you can identify variants, additions, new chapters, new work on the text, okay? The digital annotation will be lead to establish a thesaurus. I don't know if it's the word in English, thesaurus. We work with OpenTeso. It's an open source tool proposed by Humanum. It's a French partner, public partner. And the thesaurus, names of historical persons, biblical persons, mythological characters, places, works, dates, will then make it possible to establish index by manuscripts, by family of manuscript, and by group of text. And this could then be used by researchers as a tool for analyzing documents. For example, use of common sources, common references, quotations, circulation of ideas and arguments. And this could facilitate the identification of production and circulation environments, and why not, the identification of the authors themselves or readers of manuscripts. We are also thinking about the use of internal geolocation of documents. For example, identification of geographical references specific to some authors as an attribution tool, and about textometric or stylometric analysis. We are working with a TXM team. I don't know if you know TXM. It's a digital tool to analyze statistic on text. They are on our laboratory in Lyon, so it's easy to work with them. So we have decided to start with the edition of two paradigmatic texts. One, this is the Traité des Trois Imposteurs, because it's the widely distributed and still anonymous text. And this example, which will allow us to set up the comparison of numerous manuscripts and editions. So the case can help us to improve the tool themselves itself. And the other one is the Examens de la Bible by Madame du Châtelet. So identified text, but very important for us because the Examen is the only text written by a woman, and also a text that comments the entire Bible. So we can have a lot of references, quotations, and arguments to find in other manuscripts. It can serve as a first critical database from which to study the circulation of ideas and measure the reception of Emilie heterodox writing. Okay, because that's a point, we don't know who read this manuscript. So maybe we can use it as a way to identify some readers and sources of manuscript of Emilie du Châtelet. So we are going to start this work this autumn, and I'm sure it will perhaps spark ideas and inspire you young researchers to help us to do this work. And we look forward to working with you to take this project forward, because I think it's very important for us in the manuscript universe, but even for Emilie's work, because they can help to better know the special case of the manuscript and the Examens de la Bible, which is a mystery again. So I will stop now. No scientific conclusion to my presentation, but just to show you the very important manuscript Emilie has written. Is a very informal and summertime presentation, but rather is an invitation to collaborate with us as soon as the text will be available. I hope so in the autumn, because we need to encode in TEI all the manuscript, and that's a very long work to do. And that is what I got to tell you today about Emilie, about our project. And I will now try to answer to your questions. And I thank you very, very much for your patience and for your indulgence for my poor English. Thank you very much.
Thank to you, Susana. Thanks.